All right. This real okay. I think okay. Speaking of Richard Spencer, this is the real Richard Spencer here. All right. I talked this guy up.
Hi, Mr. Nasheed. How are you
Hello,
doing?
Mr. Richard. How are you, sir? How you doing? Long
I'm,
time no hear.
well, have we ever spoken before?
Yes, Richard. We've spoken before. You've been on one of my broadcasts. If this is the real
This is
Richard
the real
Spencer,
Richard, yes, 100%. Um,
yes. Remember, we had a brief debate on one of my live streams a couple of years ago.
oh, okay. What were we talking about then?
What were we talking about? You ran off the phone kind of quickly.
Oh.
So, yeah, I don't know what we were talking about, but it's online. You can find it online.
Okay.
Now, what's going on with you? They've had you in hiding. Where have you been?
Well, I mean, I've kind of went against the Trump 2020 election mainly. I don't think I'm in hiding. I'm just kind of doing my own thing and focusing on some other stuff at the moment. Focusing on more intellectual stuff. I think the alt right movement was, pretty intellectually bankrupt, and I just want to be involved in things that are exciting and challenging to me, and just tweeting about Trump and stuff just bores me to tears. So I'm just focusing on other stuff. But I think that probably, I mean, it definitely is going to mean that I'm not in the spotlight, but that's good in a way. But I've been enjoying the conversation, actually. I just popped in kind of on a whim. It's late over here, but it's a very real conversation.
Right, right. Now, how do you feel about reparations, Richard? I mean, you are the one who really helped start the alt right movement. I'm like, or you could also be solely responsible for the alt right movement. How do you feel about reparations for foundational Black Americans?
I think it's a good idea, and I understand where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the rhetoric against reparations is, I can agree with it here and there. It's and so on, but I mean, I understand that I mean, you could call it a crime, you could call it a trauma. It took place,
Mm-hmm.
and there is, it's hard to put a monetary value on something like that, but it can be done, and it just has to be done specifically. I think it's very difficult now with immigration, and including African immigration. It would be difficult to kind of, if to say, are we just giving you money because you have a darker skin color, or is this a real thing that is about people?
That's why we were making it lineage based. We
Yeah.
were making it based on people who were aggrieved here during slavery in America, people who were owed the 40 acres and a mule.
Right.
Yeah, so we made it very specific.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I kind of I like the idea of what would I don't know. It's paying off a debt. I think that's a much more serious way of thinking about something than than just kind of buzzwords about diversity and so on. So yeah, I think it would be a better use of resources. Now, would you say this if the debt were paid to a substantial amount? Is that it? Is it a one-time thing, or is it kind of an ongoing thing?
It would be in the same vein of the Native American situation. It's kind of, if you aggrieve a group, you have to, compensate them for the aggrievement. The slavery one time thing. We look at slavery, that was a 400-year torture endeavor.
Right.
It wasn't a one off. So there has to be a lot of repair there to make things equitable. We have to make things equitable. I know when I spoke with you, I know you said you like power, you believe in winning, and you can't live in a society where you feel like you're winning over another group in perpetuity, because you would have to pay for that militarily. You can't pay for military subjugation, because not only will that create hostility, the money is going to run out. And then what are you going to do? You're going to be back at square one. So it's just best to be equitable when dealing with people. Wouldn't that make sense, Richard?
It makes sense. I mean, to put a little context around what I, said, I think I'm sure I said something like that.
Right.
I mean, one thing that I appreciate about you in this discussion is that it's serious advancement of your people.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, I think you understand where I'm coming from too when I say, say something about winning. That's it's a kind of a Trumpian way of basically saying that.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I get it. I think if I had suffered like you all had, I would have very similar feelings. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I live out in the Pacific Northwest. I live in Montana, as you might know.
Yeah.
It's a different situation with the American Indian or Native American, and it was dealt with in a very different way. The reservation system, has some problems, but it is a continuing thing. I mean, when I drive through a reservation, it's very apparent where I am.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, but they got a lot.
they absolutely have a claim to a part of North America.
Yes, they do. Well, they got a lot of land. They got a lot of casinos, so a lot of them are doing actually very well. Now, as far as a lot of stuff that's going on with your movement and a lot of movements of people, I would say on the far right, but even on the left, as you know, as many stories have come out, the numbers in the dominant society, white society, those numbers are dwindling, and I know that's a real legitimate concern for a lot of people who are part of your movement, and I don't dismiss that. That is a legitimate concern.
Yeah.
What do you think should be done, or what could be done to help those numbers of those birth rates that's going on in your community? What legitimate tactics do you guys have, or what would you wish to have in order to assist with your genetic lineage going? Because I think people deserve to have their genetic lineages go on. I'm not a person who's like, okay, yeah, the hell with your lineage. If you want your lineage going, you there are things that can be done to protect that to a certain degree without systematic oppression.
Right.
What do you think would work in your eyes?
Well, it's interesting because I mean, if we go back to the Trump era, of the 2016 Trump, not the 2020 Trump, but the 2016 Trump, it was existential. And even notions like the wall, it was a kind of visual notion of we're going to protect white America effectively. Right. And I do think that's how it resonated. And, actually as someone who's a black nationalist, of a sort, that's probably a fair description of you.
Nationalist, just somebody who's trying to empower the black
community. Sure. Yeah. I think it could resonate with your community as well. But at the same time, even long before the Trump movement of 2016, I was relaying an important fact that is really undisputed, that can't be disputed, and that is that white America is going to end regardless of a wall, regardless of a total immigration shutdown. I mean, the majority of births are to non-white mothers as of 2011. So we're well past that. And we even have this kind of, terrible situation now of immigration is kind of petering out. You see the birth decline in places like Mexico. And then I can even take it to another level. I mean, I was looking at some stuff just this afternoon, pretty casually, with a friend of mine who's visiting, and the birth rate among people with college degrees, people with graduate degrees, it's below replacement. It's significantly lower than people who have not completed high school.
Yeah,
and that's a real thing. I mean, you're the product of your mom and dad.
Yeah,
and again, I don't have it out for those people in this at all, but it's I want people who've gotten master's degrees and are doctors and lawyers and so on to be having children, and so it's a difficult situation, and it's even worse in a way due to kind of degenerative effects in terms of breeding, we want to use that word now. I mean, we're breeding for heart disease effectively. We're promoting congenital diseases through fertility, and
across all racial groups too.
yeah, that, as my friend added, it's true across all racial groups. So I think we're in a really serious situation, and I don't think there's been enough like outside the box thinking and discussions where we can really talk about this seriously about what we can do.
Right. The movement now with all of the sexual confusion with the trans this and the trans that, how do you think that affects your community? Because they use Black people, they'll use us as the face of it to sell it. But
Mhm.
ultimately, a lot of that is done to undermine your numbers as well in the white community. Do you understand that?
I absolutely understand that. Yeah, I think it's a terrible confusion in terms of identity, and I think we're the way I would describe it, and this is going to get a little bit dark, I guess, is that we're in a bottleneck, and the people who are going to get out of this bottleneck, that is the people who are going to have a future and have children, are going to be those who are either, to be frank, too stupid to care. They just have a kid because they were at some biker bar and they got knocked some girl up,
Right.
or they're going to have a strong will to live, and they want a future. They understand what it means to have children, and those people will live. The people who don't have that inborn passion won't survive. And so I think, the way you can think of it is, and I'm kind of calling upon my friend Ed Dutton on this, but in previous centuries, before the Industrial Revolution and modern medicine and all these technological advances, child mortality was 50%. Most children born did not live into adulthood.
Right.
And that, we can't even imagine living in that time now. Even if your child dies, oh my gosh, that's the most traumatic thing you could imagine. In previous centuries, that was the norm. And I think we've almost reached a new child mortality, a new type of child mortality, where if you can survive this gauntlet and you see like the gender confusion and deconstruction of identity, etc., and you just say no to it, so you have a will to live, you are going to have a future.
Right.
And I'm just going to be brutally frank, but the weak won't.
Right. Yeah. I agree with that. Yeah. All right, but Richard, man, I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much for calling in.
Yeah.
I
Good
think-
conversation.
Yes, indeed, man. More power to you, buddy. Be good. All
Yeah,
right.
likewise.
That was Richard Spencer, the person who started the alt-right. And the thing about Richard, we can have a logical conversation with Richard. Hold on, somebody's texting me.